All right. What is going on YouTube? Welcome back to another video, guys. In today's video, we have a very, very important topic. Now, in this video, there's not going to be any fancy editing or pictures or, B-rolls or whatever. It's just going to be a raw talk about regretting your loss. I've actually been getting this question for years, probably since I made this channel. One of the common things that I always get asked is, Jack, I'm 24 years old. I feel like I missed out on my youth. Or I'm 25 years old. I never had a girlfriend. I feel like I missed out on my youth. And, you know, it took me some time to really think about this whole idea of missing out on your youth. I don't talk about my childhood a lot, but I can somewhat relate to the idea of the whole kind of missing out on your youth. Now, I didn't really miss out on my youth, but I did have a childhood that didn't really allow me to be a child. Like I pretty much didn't really have a childhood, if we're being honest. I kind of had a childhood similar to a Michael Jackson. I was forced to work as a child, as a young teenager. My stepfather had a business, and I would work every summer, all summer long in the heat, with no pay. So instead of, getting out of school for summer break and playing with kids and waking up anytime and playing outside all day, I was forced to work. And so, I've worked through a lot of these issues, a lot of these things from my childhood. I've been able to work through these things. And so I do kind of somewhat relate to kind of missing out on your youth. I did go to college, and I'll talk about this in a second, but I do believe college is a big, big, big part of the whole like youth aspect. But at the same time, I had to survive, at 18, 17, 16, I pretty much was on my own. I was out of the house at 16 years old, and I had to survive. I had to grow up very, very, very fast, So this idea of like, oh, I missed out on 16 to 24, bruh. I can't really relate that much because I didn't really have that choice. It was do or die. I didn't have a choice. And actually, this is something that happens with a lot of black males. Actually, a lot of black males like myself, we tend to grow up in situations where we're forced to grow up very, very fast. So one of the things that I noticed is that a lot of young men, especially like American young men, have this kind of like permanent high school FOMO complex that they missed out on being surrounded by, young, youthful, blonde girls and the cheerleaders and being hooking up behind the high school bleachers. Like they have this like fantasy, this fantasy that they missed out on these big ventures. And some of it is true, But first, I want to talk about what is youth. Let's define youth. Let's talk about what is youth. Youth is essentially a period of personal and social and psychological development. That is your youth. Now, when does your youth technically take place? The youth, and this is according to psychology, youth is the intermediate stage between adolescence and adulthood. This is called youth. The area between your adolescence and adulthood. So that area from like basically like 15 to like 25, that 10-year span is essentially what people will call youth. Now, again, it doesn't mean after 25 you're old and life is over. It doesn't mean that. It just means this is that stage where there's a lot of development that is happening. Your brain even doesn't even fully develop until you're 25, So there's a lot of development going on. And during this time period, most people are attempting to work out the resolution between their own ideas, their own ideals, and the demands of the world. So this is where you kind of start to try to find your place in this world. And so it's a time where you're kind of free from the heavy responsibilities of life, like after 25, you're kind of forced by life to really start thinking about real choices. Up until then, it's kind of like, you just kind of been enjoying your time. And I don't mean that you've been wasting this time, just wasting away doing nothing. You should be working. You should be building yourself up. But life isn't really that serious yet, and it's not until like 25 where society starts to kind of have certain expectations of you, your parents, people start to see like, okay, you're not a kid anymore, bro. You're 25, 26, you're entering your late 20s, a couple years away from 30. You got to pay rent. You start thinking about, okay, how am I going to save money? If you want a family, you really got to start thinking about that at that time as well. So life starts to kind of come at you fast during this time period. And this is kind of like the mark of the end of youth, where now you're a full adult now. You're not a youth, you're not technically a youth anymore. You're a full adult. But youth is, like I said, youth is a very important period of life. And it's critical because you start to solidify who you are. Like I said, the brain doesn't fully finish developing until 25. And after that point, it's damn near impossible to change. So it's a critical period. A lot of lifelong friendships are formed during this time period. There's a process called differentiation. And basically what this is this is essentially you breaking away from the shadow of your parents physically and psychologically. In the past, this was known as kind of rites of passage. But this is a process differentiation. This is you differentiating yourself from your parents, your family, from their own values. You start to come up with your own beliefs, your own values, your own personality, what you like, what you don't like. And one of the things that I've noticed, and this is a trend that I've noticed with young men, is that college, college it's not just about, you go and get a shitty degree. What college I've noticed, college represents this kind of differentiation period where the boy leaves his parents' house, and you're on your own. A lot of development happens in college. A lot of what so-called youth development actually happens in college. For the first time in your life, you're out of your parents' basement, but now we're seeing a lot of young men skipping college. So even though rites of passages have been long done, most young men aren't even going to college anymore. So there's no way, most young men have no way of kind of engaging in this process of differentiation, of actually forging their own way in this world. So they just become basically failures to launch. They become people who failed to launch. They failed to actually launch and start a life for themselves. They spent years probably in front of video games. And again, there's nothing wrong with video games, but if you're wasting years of your life, especially in youth, you can play video games later on in life. When you're in your 30s, and you're a bachelor, you'll have all the time in the world to play video games, guys. But in your youth, a lot of these guys have wasted years behind computers, just wasting away their youth, And so, but I do think college is a good way. It has been a good way historically to kind of start forging your own way in this world. You start to develop who you are as a person. You learn the ability to voice your own emotions. You learn how to communicate with people. You learn how to collaborate. You learn all these skills, like I said, personally, psychologically, and socially. And in youth, one of the things about youth is that the world does seem more vivid, because everything is kind of new. So you haven't had a lot of time to accumulate what's called hedonic adaptation. You haven't had a lot of time to do that. So everything is kind of vivid. The world is bright. Everything's new. You might have your first sip of alcohol and everything just like, you're like, oh my God, I love drinking. And it's just vivid. Every experience is essentially a brand new experience. And I think this is what makes youth so special, and this is the part of the social clock. The social clock is the idea that, there are certain milestones that you should go through at certain time periods in your life. And I think it makes sense because in youth, everything is kind of vivid. So when you're having these experiences in youth, they just hit different. I'm just going to be honest. It doesn't mean you can't have these same experiences later on, but in youth, it just hits different, right? And that's just something that is just facts. But because in youth, your brain still hasn't fully developed. Your brain is still pretty much malleable, however you say that word. It's changing, evolving. So all of these experiences are coming at you and your dopamine is firing off high. And this is why I think people have such fond memories of youth, because of the dopaminergic activity that's going on during this age, the serotonin secretion. Your brain chemistry is firing like crazy. Your brain is trying to figure out, what it's like. It's still developing. So it's just chaotic. It's like fireworks going off, And so this is why I think people have vivid memories of youth. Um, but I do think a part of enjoying your youth is your parents setting you up right. If you grew up like, for example, me, I wasn't really set up to enjoy my youth. In order to fully enjoy your youth, a lot of this depends on your parents. If your parents don't set you up to really succeed and have a good youth, it's going to be a struggle. It's going to be a struggle no matter what you do. So a lot of this is a family background, guys. A lot of this stuff is what cards you were dealt in life. I always tell you guys this, the hand you were dealt. Family, where you were born, what type of family you were born into, at what time period. All these things make a big difference. But most people follow the social clock. So, if you're a 30-year-old, it's not to say, hey, at 30, you can go try to relive your youth. All those experiences that you didn't have in your youth, you can now go and try to achieve now. But the problem is that it just doesn't hit the same because, like I said, your brain has fully developed. You now have some form of life experience. Time has kind of started to pass by, and you've aged. You've aged some, and not that you're old, but you have aged. So, and most people, a lot of times, what makes these experiences special is experiencing them with other people who are also enjoying their own youth. As a 30-year-old, if you try to go back to college and relive your youth, it's just not going to work. Most people are following the social clock. Most people, the average person is enjoying their youth. You know, on the internet, on the internet, everything seems like, oh, everybody's having a terrible life. The world sucks. But if you actually look at the reality, most people are getting on with their lives. Most people are getting on with it. You know, the internet is full of complainers. The internet is full of people who complain about their problems because it's pretty much an outlet for that. But if you look in reality, most people are following the social clock. Um, but lost time is never. You can never get back lost time. You can never reclaim your youth. And this is what I want to talk about now. So I want to talk a little bit about the what are some solutions. If you're a guy and you really missed out on youth, um, what are the solutions? First off, you have to accept that there pretty much is no solution. Trying to make up for lost time will only make you desperate, and it would kind of make up for lost time actually keeps you from progressing in your life because you're instead of living forward, you're living backwards. And this is the most important thing is you just need to cut your losses. You need to accept that, hey, those things that you think you missed, those things probably wouldn't have happened for you anyway. Maybe they just weren't in the cards for you. Like I said, for me, I really never had a chance of technically enjoying my youth. Although I did kind of enjoy my youth because I went to college, I went to the parties. I had a really good time in college. It was fun. I met some good, cool people, good friends. I really, I went to the football games. I went to the frat parties. I hooked up with some girls in college, so, I did some traveling during summer break. I would book a trip. So I would save my money up during the semester and I booked trips to the Dominican Republic. So I did have really good experiences, but it wasn't a traditional path. I wasn't set up I had to like literally force my way into that life. I even went into debt in college. I went into some debt in college, which is paid off now, which is, this is why I always say like, going into debt in college is not that big of a deal. As long as you're getting a decent degree and, you aren't going into like, $100,000 in debt. I think the average student loan debt is like 30K, 40K, which is over a lifetime. It's not a lot of money. You can pay that money off pretty quickly. But again, I'm not saying that you need to go to college and college is the answer, but just something to think about. But you need to cut your losses and accept that lost time. You accept that, hey, I just missed out on some of my youth and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't spin it into a positive. Oh, well, I can make up later. No, not really. Your youth, you got to just kind of grieve, give yourself time to kind of just grieve that like, hey, I did miss out on some of these experiences, but you got to progress in life. You got to just get on with it. So many times, so many young men are crying about, oh, I lost my youth. And it's just like, just motherfucker, just get on with it. Get on with life, bruh. You know, life is not over at once. Your youth is only like 10 years, but you got the rest of your life to live. So you got to get on with life. The more time you sit and sulk and complain and waste and grieve is more time that life is still now currently passing you by. Do you have something going for yourself? Do you have a good way to make good money? Because, after 25, your money is going to be very, very important, not for the sake of dating, but for your own well being. Because when you have money, you now can live your life. In youth, you can do a lot of stuff for free. Everything's free. There's house parties, there's this. But as you get older, past the age of 25, you're really going to need money to enjoy life. I'm not saying you need to be a millionaire, but you need to be thriving. You can't be struggling. If you're struggling, your life is going to pretty much suck. It's going to suck if you're not making. If you're over the age of 25 and you don't have any career prospects or anything going for yourself, your life is going to suck shit. I'm just going to be honest with you. And in that case, you should be grieving. You should be upset, and you should use that to like start trying to make something of yourself, right? Not because of dating or because of women, but for your own sake. You still got a life to live, man. If you're 25, 24, bro, you still got, let's see, the average lifespan is 73 for men. So you got a good 50, almost 50 years, bro, to live. You still got 50 more fucking years, bro. So you still got a long time. Your youth is only a small portion of life. It's an important aspect of life, don't get me wrong, but it's a small segment of life, you know. And you're still young in the grand scheme of things. You're still pretty young, even if you're 30. 30 it's not that old. It's old. Don't get me wrong. You're not like some 23-year old, but in the grand scheme of things, it's still pretty young. This is why I think the most important aspect is money. You need to grieve your lost youth. Go ahead and let bygones be bygones. Accept the lost time. Accept that, yeah, you might have missed out on some critical life experiences. And the brutal part is that sometimes missing out on these experiences cause you to be severely underdeveloped. So instead of actually mentally being where you should be, you're underdeveloped. Your mind hasn't developed, your personality, your understanding of life. Your brain just hasn't developed socially. You're kind of just like behind. You're not like autistic, but you technically are autistic because you're 25, but your development is still stuck at the age of a 17-year-old. And I think that's the most brutal aspect of just not having a youth, is that you miss out on that development part. And that's hard to come back from. That's very, very hard to come back from. You can come back from it, but it's hard. It's going to take some time for you to actually get yourself out of that hole you're in. You're in a deficit right now, and it can be done, but it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. You got to let bygones be bygones. The whole I missed out on parties. You got to just accept that shit, bro. It doesn't mean that you can't have fun in your 30s. It doesn't mean you can't have fun in your late 20s. But like I said, that vividness of youth is starting to pass you by. But that's okay. It's not all bad, because like I said, life can still be great. My life is really good at 31 right now. My life is pretty fucking good. It's better than it was at 21, you know. But if you ask someone else, they might say, "Oh, my life was better at 21." So it depends on your family background. I wasn't given the tools to be successful. I wasn't given the tools to really enjoy my youth. So at 31 right now, I got a great career going for myself. I got money. My mental health is pretty much in check. I can afford to do things, trips. I can do whatever I want, hobbies, play video games, afford to buy the best state of the art gaming PC, anything I want. I can make all my dreams come true. Everything I wanted as a kid, I can make come true right now. And again, I'm not saying that that's making up for lost time, but you can still enjoy life. That's the bottom line. So regretting your lost youth, cut your losses, accept it, and get on with life. You got to just get the fuck on with life. Fix the damage. You got to just let yourself go through and fix the mental damage that's been done. You need to deal with any underlying issues, any type of emotional issues, complexes that you've developed over the FOMO of youth. You need to start working through therapy, working with somebody to get through these things. And again, I'm not saying therapy is going to fix you. Therapy is only to help you understand yourself. A lot of these things is just kind of talking through them and getting through them. It's shining light on these things. But yeah, dealing with these complexes, dealing with these underlying issues, make sure you deal with them, because if you don't, you will still have that kind of complex of trying to be young, trying to be in your youth. And it's like, bro, just stop, you know? So anyway, that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like it, share this video in forums, share it in Discord servers, and I'll catch you in the next one.